I was raised to believe silence meant strength. Don't talk. Don't cry. Just endure. I'm 75 years old, and silence hurt me more than any argument ever did. But silence don't just keep pain out. It keeps love out too. Phone calls stopped. Holidays passed. Family drifted away. When family bonds break and heal, I'm 75 years old now. And if there's one thing time will teach you, whether you're ready for the lesson or not, it's that silence can hurt louder than shouting ever could. I didn't always know that. When I was younger, I believed silence meant strength. Thought it meant I had control. If I didn't speak, couldn't be hurt. If I walked away, I won. That's how a lot of us men were raised, especially black men of my generation. You hold it in. You keep moving. You don't bleed where folks can see it. But family don't work like that. Hold on tight, because this story is about to take a wild turn. Before we dive in, smash that like button, drop a comment with where you're watching from, and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out on more thrilling tales ahead. Let's get into it. Family remembers. The break between us didn't come with thunder or raised voices. No police lights. No slammed doors. Just distance. Quiet. Days turning into weeks. Weeks into years. Phone calls unanswered. Holidays that came and went without a knock at the door. I told myself I was fine. I wasn't. At night, when the house settled and the world got still, that silence would creep in. Sit next to me like it belonged there. I'd hear echoes of laughter that used to fill rooms, Sunday dinners, card games, stories told too many times, but laughed at just the same. I missed those sounds more than I ever admitted. Pride is a dangerous thing, especially when it dresses itself up as dignity. I told myself I had my reasons, and maybe I did. Hurt don't come from nowhere, but neither does healing. Years passed. Life kept pushing forward like it always does. Funerals, birthdays, new faces, fewer old ones. Time don't stop to ask if you're ready. It just keeps collecting what you don't hold on to. And then one day, without warning, the silence cracked. A message came through. Short, simple, no speeches. I've been thinking about you. I stared at those words for a long time, because answering meant opening doors I had nailed shut. It meant admitting I wasn't as strong as I pretended to be. It meant facing my own part in the breaking. And let me tell you something, at 75, you get tired of carrying anger. It weighs more than regret. So I answered, not with forgiveness, not with explanations, just honesty. And that's where healing really started. Not loud, not dramatic, but slow, careful, like rebuilding something old with hands that shake a little more than they used to. We talked, we paused, we listened. Some days hurt, some days healed, and somewhere along the way, I learned something I wish I'd known sooner. Family bonds don't heal because time passes. They heal because somebody chooses love over being right. I was raised in a time when being a black boy meant learning early how to hold your face steady, no matter what was happening inside you. Strength wasn't something we talked about, it was something you showed by what you didn't say. I grew up watching men who woke up before the sun and came home after dark, their hands rough, their backs tired, their words few. They loved us, I know that now. But love back then didn't sound like hugs or long conversations. Love sounded like, you got food? You got a roof? Then keep it moving. Crying wasn't forbidden, exactly. It just wasn't encouraged. If tears came, you wiped them quick and kept your eyes forward. Feelings were something you handled on your own time, preferably alone. My father didn't talk much about emotions. He talked about work, responsibility, respect. He believed a man proved himself by how much he could carry without complaint. And I watched him carry plenty. He wasn't cruel, just quiet. When something hurt him, he tightened his jaw and went back to work. When something disappointed him, he grew silent. That silence became a language of its own, and without realizing it, I learned how to speak it fluently. By the time I was a teenager, I already knew how to swallow words that wanted to come out. I knew how to pretend I was fine. I knew how to look strong even when I was confused, scared, or lonely. Church played a role too. Faith taught us endurance, taught us to pray on it and keep going. And prayer helped, I won't deny that. But sometimes prayer replaced conversation, and suffering became something you offered up instead of something you shared. Nobody ever sat me down and said, "Don't talk about your feelings." They didn't have to. It was in the way men nodded at each other instead of hugging, in the way pain was joked about instead of named, in the way silence earned respect. So when I became a man, I wore that silence like armor. I carried it into marriage, into fatherhood, into family disagreements. When something fell off, I didn't reach for conversation, I reached for distance. When conflict showed up, I believed time would handle it better than words ever could. And for a while, that worked. Or at least, I thought it did. Because silence has a way of feeling peaceful when you're the one choosing it. It gives you control, lets you avoid the messiness of emotions, the risk of saying the wrong thing. But silence also builds walls. And walls don't just keep pain out, they keep love out too. Looking back now, I can see how many moments I missed because I didn't know how to be soft. How many chances to say, "That hurt me," or "I'm sorry," or "I don't understand, help me." Those weren't words I had practiced. Strength, the way I was taught it, didn't leave much room for vulnerability. And vulnerability, I would learn much later, is where healing usually begins. At 75, I don't blame the men who raised me. They survived things I'll never fully understand. Racism that pressed in from every direction. A world that punished weakness and rewarded endurance. They did the best they knew how. But I also know this. What protects you in one season can harm you in another. That silence I learned so well, it helped me survive. But it nearly cost me my family. My mama loved in a way that didn't ask for applause. She wasn't the kind of woman who made speeches about sacrifice or reminded you of what she'd done. She just did it, quietly, consistently, like breathing. If my daddy taught me how to be strong, my mama taught me how to endure. She woke up before the rest of the house stirred, moving through the kitchen with practiced ease. Pots clinked softly, coffee brewed. The smell of biscuits or bacon filled the air, not because it was a special day, but because feeding your people was love in her language. She didn't talk much about her feelings either, but hers showed up in actions. Extra food on your plate when you looked tired. A hand on your back that lingered just long enough to say, "I see you." Clothes washed and folded before you even realized they were gone. Mama had a way of listening without interrupting. When I spoke, she didn't rush to correct or fix. She let my words land, even when they came out sideways. And when she finally spoke, it was usually something simple, but it stuck. "Everybody hurting carry it different," she used to say. "Don't mean they ain't hurting." I didn't fully understand that then. She held the family together in ways nobody noticed until something went wrong. She remembered birthdays, smoothed over disagreements, and made sure folks sat at the same table even when they weren't speaking much. Mama believed in togetherness, even when it was uncomfortable. When tensions rose, she didn't demand apologies. She cooked. She invited. She created space for people to exist near one another until feelings softened on their own. Looking back, I realize how much emotional labor she carried without ever calling it that. And maybe that's why, when family bonds later began to break, her absence felt so heavy. By the time the silence crept into our family, Mama was already slowing down. Her steps weren't as quick. Her voice wasn't as strong. And eventually, she wasn't there at all. Her passing left a gap wider than we knew how to fill. Without her steady presence, small disagreements didn't get smoothed over. Hurt feelings didn't get redirected toward the dinner table. Silence didn't get interrupted by laughter or food. And I didn't know how to step into the role she once played. I loved deeply, but I loved quietly. I waited for time to fix things. I believed people would come around when they were ready. Mama would have picked up the phone. She would have shown up with a dish and a soft voice. She would have reminded us that pride don't keep you warm at night. I think about her often now, about the way she loved without keeping score, about how she understood that family isn't about perfection, it's about presence. If I'd learned one thing sooner, it would have been this. Love has to be shown while people can still feel it. Mama knew that. I learned it later than I wish I had. Continuing, Sundays were sacred in our house not just because of church, but because of what came after. Church fed the spirit, supper fed everything else. By the time Sunday afternoon rolled around, the house started to fill up. Cousins, aunts, uncles, neighbors who might as well have been family. Doors stayed open. Laughter traveled from room to room. Somebody always showed up late, and somebody always complained about it. The table never looked big enough, but somehow it stretched to fit everyone. Food was the centerpiece, but stories were the real nourishment. Stories about folks who came before us. Stories that had been told so many times you could finish them before the speaker did, but you let them tell it anyway. That was our history book. Uncle so-and-so who worked 2 jobs and never complained. Auntie who raised kids that weren't hers. Grandpa's run-ins with trouble and how he walked away just in time. Stories carried lessons without sounding like lectures. That's how we learned who we were. Nobody said, "This is how you survive." They just told stories, and you picked it up. Those gatherings taught me something important. Family isn't just blood, it's memory. Shared laughter, shared struggle, shared meals. When disagreements happened, and they did, Sunday supper still came. You might not sit next to the person you were mad at. You might not say much, but you showed up. Showing up mattered. I didn't realize how much those Sundays held us together until they started disappearing. Folks moved away. Jobs changed schedules. Health slowed people down. Eventually, the table got quieter. And when conflict later entered our family, there was no familiar table left to return to. No shared space where silence could soften just by proximity. We lost more than meals. We lost the rhythm that reminded us we belonged to each other. Now, at my age, I understand how fragile those moments were. How easy it is to assume there will always be another Sunday, another dinner, another chance to sit and talk. There isn't always. I carry those memories with me now like heirlooms. They remind me of what family looks like when it's whole. They remind me of what we're trying to get back to, even if it never looks exactly the same. Continuing, when I left home for the first time, I carried a lot of lessons I didn't even know I'd learned. Most of them were wrapped in silence. Most of them told me to stand tall and keep my feelings to myself. I married young. Thought I knew what love was because I'd seen it around me in pieces. My mama's quiet care. My daddy's work-worn hands. Church prayers that spoke louder than words. But love in a marriage, love that has to be shared, negotiated, explained, was different. I carried my burdens the way I had been taught, alone. If the bills piled up, I should figure it out. If someone was upset, I should let it ride until it blew over. If someone needed me, I should be there, but quietly, without complaining, without asking for help. And at first, it worked. At least, I thought it did. But the truth is, carrying everything alone isn't strength. It's exhaustion. And it's lonely. I remember nights lying awake while my wife slept, feeling the weight of responsibilities pressing down like bricks. Bills, work, children, expectations stacked high. And not a soul to talk to about it. Not a single voice to tell me, "It's all right. We'll figure it out together." I thought that asking for help would make me weak. I thought talking about my feelings would make me less of a man. I thought if I showed my hurt, it would ruin the image of strength I had spent my whole life crafting. And so I carried it. All of it. Alone. It wasn't until much later that I realized that carrying alone had consequences far bigger than me. It created gaps in relationships I couldn't fix with a single apology. It built walls between me and my children, between me and siblings, between me and my own heart. One of my sons once asked me, "Daddy, why don't you talk to me?" I didn't have an answer. Not one he would understand. Not one I was ready to admit. So I stayed quiet. That silence built a chasm that took decades to begin repairing. It wasn't just pride that kept me quiet. It was fear. Fear that if I opened up, I'd spill more than I could contain. Fear that my pain would be too much for anyone else. Fear that if I showed vulnerability, I'd finally break and nobody could patch me back together. But here's the thing about fear. It don't keep the hurt from growing. It only buries it where it festers. And years later, when the hurt finally rises to the surface, It doesn't just touch you, it touches everyone around you. I learned the hard way that sharing the load isn't weakness. It's life. It's love. And it's what I should have done a long time ago. By the time I was in my 40s, I began to understand that silence is a powerful teacher but also a dangerous one. It teaches endurance. It teaches patience. But it also teaches isolation. And I had learned isolation too well. Carrying alone may have kept me standing, but it also kept me from healing. Continuing. Pride has a way of creeping in when you least expect it, and it often shows up dressed like love. I didn't know it then, but many of the breaks in my family started there. I loved my family. I really did. I loved my wife, my children, my siblings, my parents. But I loved in the way I had been taught quietly, carefully, behind a shield of pride. I measured my words, my actions, my affection. I figured if I kept everything controlled, nothing would break. I was wrong. Love without communication is a fragile thing. It looks strong from the outside because it's consistent, but inside, it's brittle. It bends under pressure, and eventually, it snaps. I remember one argument with my brother, small, meaningless by itself, but I let pride turn it into something bigger. I refused to apologize first. I refused to show weakness. I convinced myself I was protecting my honor. But what I was really protecting was my ego. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. The words we left unsaid hung in the air like smoke, and neither of us knew how to clear it. I see now that love and pride are not enemies, but when pride dominates, it strangles love. It tells you to wait, to watch, to endure silently. It convinces you that healing can wait, that the other person should be the first to bend. I thought I was patient. I thought I was strong. I was neither. It wasn't just with my brother. Pride affected every corner of my life. With my wife, I argued about small things and refused to admit when I was wrong. With my children, I demanded respect without teaching them how to earn it or how to respect themselves. With my parents, I stayed silent when I should have spoken. All the while, love sat there, patient, waiting for me to step out of my own way. It took years and plenty of heartache to understand that stepping aside for love doesn't make you less of a man. It makes you human. And sometimes, that's all it takes to start mending what pride has broken. By the time I started to listen to really hear, things began to shift. Not quickly, not perfectly, but slowly. One conversation, one apology, one honest admission at a time. I realized that love needs courage to survive. Pride doesn't. Pride just keeps score. Love, on the other hand, keeps trying even when the other person doesn't. And I finally understood that courage often comes with humility. There's a moment in every family where words fail. You don't notice it at first. It's subtle. A conversation that ends abruptly. A joke that isn't laughed at. A look that says more than anything spoken. And then, one day, the words just stop. For my family, that day didn't arrive with shouting or slamming doors. It came quietly, like the last leaf falling from a tree in November. It was a Sunday afternoon, like many others. The table was set. The food smelled right, but the people weren't. I remember my brother sitting across from me, his jaw tight, his eyes looking everywhere but at mine. My mama had passed a few years before, and her absence left a space too large for any of us to fill. We tried to talk about small things at first: work, bills, the kids, but even those topics carried weight we weren't ready to lift. Somehow, in the space of an hour, the conversation shrank. The jokes stopped landing. Laughter disappeared. The meal ended. Plates were cleared without a single word. And in that silence, I felt a shift. It wasn't just the silence of that day, it was the beginning of years of silence. After that, calls went unanswered. Visits became infrequent. Birthdays passed without mention. Holidays came and went like strangers knocking on a door nobody answered. We all told ourselves it was nothing personal. That time and space would heal everything. But time doesn't heal if you don't meet it halfway. I carried that day with me like a stone in my chest. Every memory of that table, every glance that said I don't know how to reach you anymore, replayed in my mind for years. I thought I could move on. I thought I could protect myself by ignoring the pain. But the truth is, when words fail, silence speaks louder. And it wasn't just words failing us. It was the pride, the fear, the habits we carried from childhood beliefs that saying what you feel makes you weak, that admitting hurt gives someone else power over you. By the time I realized how deeply that day had wounded us, it had become a wall. A wall that separated siblings, parents, spouses, and children. A wall I didn't know how to tear down. All I knew was that if something didn't change, we'd go the rest of our lives living in fragments of the family we used to be. After that day, silence became my shield. I wore it like armor, thinking it would protect me from hurt. And for a while, it did. It kept the sharp edges of arguments away. It kept me from saying the wrong thing, or so I thought. But silence is tricky. It doesn't just protect, it isolates. It builds walls higher than any words could knock down. And it quietly convinces you that you're safe, even as it lets pain fester underneath. I convinced myself I was fine. I told my wife I didn't want to argue. I told my children I was just busy. I told my siblings that time would fix things. And in every case, silence was easier than risk. It worked for a little while. People stopped waiting for me to speak. They stopped asking questions. They stopped reaching out. And eventually, I stopped feeling the urgency to connect. The silence became routine, comfortable, safe, except it wasn't safe at all. Inside, the hurt didn't vanish. It grew. It became a quiet ache that followed me through work, through nights lying awake in the dark, through holidays where the house felt too big and too empty at the same time. Every memory of laughter at the supper table, every story my mama told, every embrace I once took for granted, it all pressed against me in that quiet. I wasn't just shielding myself from conflict. I was shielding myself from love. And the irony? The very people I thought I was protecting by staying quiet were the ones who needed my voice most. My children, my siblings, even my wife, they were reaching for me in ways I didn't see. And all I gave them was absence. I realized, slowly, that silence as a shield only works if both sides want protection. If one side is reaching for connection, silence becomes a prison. It took me decades to understand that. To see that real strength isn't keeping quiet, it's speaking, even when your voice shakes. It's saying what matters, even when it might hurt. It's admitting your own flaws before pointing out someone else's. I learned that the hard way. And in that learning, I also began to understand something else. Silence can't last forever. Sooner or later, it must break either by reconciliation or regret. And the longer it lasts, the heavier the burden when it finally does. Time don't wait for nobody. It moves steady, whether you're ready or not, whether your heart is heavy or light. And when family breaks, time has a way of showing you exactly what you've lost. I watched it in my parents first. Daddy's steps grew slower. His voice, once firm and steady, softened with age. Mama was gone by then, and I could see how much her absence weighed on him. He tried to hide it, like he always did, but I could feel it. Every pause, every sigh, every quiet glance told me he was carrying more than he should. I watched it in my children too. They grew up fast, moving through life while I stayed stuck in old patterns, silent, stubborn, unwilling to reach. They learned from me, whether I meant to teach or not. Sometimes the lessons were about strength, sometimes about distance. And seeing that hurt, they hurt me in ways I couldn't always fix. Funerals became a cruel reminder. Friends gone, family gone, faces you hoped to see one more time gone. I would sit there in the church pew, hands folded, watching the caskets pass, thinking about the words left unsaid, the calls never made, the hugs never given. Time takes everything in the end if you don't hold it close while you can. It made me realize that the silence I held for decades wasn't protecting me, it was stealing pieces of life I'll never get back. Every argument avoided, every apology postponed, every "I love you" swallowed, those moments added up. And now, they sat heavy in my chest, reminders that life is too short for grudges and pride. I remember a Sunday in particular, sitting alone in the living room after a funeral, the house quiet, the sunlight spilling through the blinds. I thought about all the chances I'd wasted, about all the times I could have reached out, spoken my heart, healed small wounds before they became scars. And I promised myself, right then and there, that I wouldn't let any more time pass without trying. Time don't heal wounds by itself. It only makes you notice them. And the longer you wait, the deeper the mark. I started paying attention to that mark. I started thinking about what it would take to begin repairing what pride and silence had broken. It wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be quick. But at 70, I realized that the only choice left was to try. Regret has a voice. It doesn't scream. It whispers. Softly, quietly, late at night. And it reminds you of every word you didn't speak, every apology you held back, every "I love you" that never left your lips. There were so many things I meant to say to my wife, my children, my siblings, my parents. Little things, big things, things I thought didn't matter at the time, but mattered more than I knew. I meant to tell my father how proud I was of him, how I saw the sacrifices he made, how his strength and quiet love shaped me into the man I became. I never said it while he was alive. By the time I found the courage, he was gone. I meant to tell my mother that I understood her way of loving, that I saw it all along, even if I pretended not to, that her patience, her presence, her quiet insistence that we sit together at the table mattered more than she knew. She was gone too. I meant to tell my wife that I appreciated her in ways words didn't always capture, that I saw her struggles, her endurance, her heart, that I loved her not just for what she did, but for who she was. Many times, I didn't. I stayed silent, thinking she knew. Sometimes she did. Sometimes she didn't. I meant to tell my children that I was proud of them, that mistakes don't define you, that love doesn't disappear when people get mad, that life is too short for resentment. I waited too long for the right moment and nearly missed it. I meant to say all of this to my siblings, to tell them I loved them despite the fights, despite the distance, despite the pride and stubbornness that kept us apart. But I let silence hold me back. I let fear of being misunderstood keep me from speaking. Regret doesn't just live in the past. It lives in the present too, whispering reminders of what could have been. But I've learned that regret doesn't have to be permanent. Words that are spoken late are still words. Apologies that come slowly are still apologies. Love expressed after years is still love. So I started speaking. Not all at once. Not perfectly. Not even eloquently. But honestly. One call, one conversation, one moment at a time. And slowly, the walls I built with silence began to crack. The things I meant to say didn't disappear, they just waited. Waiting isn't always bad. Waiting can be a teacher. Waiting can make you see how much courage it takes to speak. And when you finally do, sometimes you find that love has been waiting on the other side. I spent most of my life thinking pride was a badge of honor, a mark that I could carry my burdens, face the world, and never bend. And for a long time, I believed it made me strong. It didn't. Pride kept me from saying sorry when it mattered. Pride kept me from picking up the phone to check on my siblings. Pride kept me from telling my children I was proud of them. Pride kept me silent while love waited patiently on the other side. I learned, slowly, that pride ain't the same as peace. You can be proud and miserable at the same time. You can hold your head high and still carry a hollow ache in your chest. Pride doesn't fix the hurt, it only masks it. Peace is different. Peace is quiet. Peace is patient. Peace is the kind of thing that doesn't care who's right and who's wrong. Peace is saying what needs to be said, forgiving what needs to be forgiven, and letting love have its way even if it bruises your ego. I saw it one afternoon with my brother. We had gone months without speaking, but finally, I decided to call. My hand shook before I dialed. Pride whispered, "Don't do it." Fear whispered, "They won't understand." But I ignored them both. I spoke from my chest, from my heart. I said what needed to be said. I admitted my wrongs. I acknowledged his. And in that moment, something shifted. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't instant. But it was real. Peace was there, waiting, patient. Pride had no place at the table. I realized then that pride might protect your image. It might help you feel strong for a little while. But peace heals. Peace reconnects. Peace saves moments that pride would let slip away. I didn't learn this lesson quickly. Took decades, really. But better late than never. And that's the difference. Pride keeps you standing, but peace lets you live. Love has a patience that pride can't understand. It waits, sometimes for years, sometimes through mistakes, silence, and stubbornness. And sometimes it waits quietly, without making a sound, until you're finally ready to see it. I began to notice it in my family. Even when we weren't speaking, even when pride and fear built walls between us, love was there. Patient, persistent, waiting. I saw it in my children. They kept trying. Little gestures, a call, a question, a visit. They didn't give up, even when I did. They showed me that love doesn't quit just because I withdrew. I saw it in my siblings. Despite years of unspoken words and distance, when we finally started talking again, it was like a light turning on in a room that had been dark too long. Their willingness to forgive and keep trying reminded me that love never abandons, even when people do. And I saw it in myself. Finally, I realized that I had been carrying love inside me all along, even if I didn't know how to express it. It was waiting for me to open my heart, to put pride aside, to speak the words that mattered. Love isn't loud. It isn't always obvious. It doesn't demand attention, but it's there, quietly waiting, giving second chances, third chances, as many as it takes. I began to understand that it was never too late to let love lead. That even after decades of silence, of hurt, of mistakes, love was patient enough to meet me where I was. I learned to show it too, to speak it, to reach out, to hold hands, to say I'm sorry, to admit I was wrong. And every time I did, I felt the weight lift just a little. The walls crumble, the silence soften. Love waits. And if you're willing, it teaches you how to keep waiting too, not for perfection, but for connection. That's the lesson I carry now, every day. That's the gift I didn't know I had missed until I opened my heart. I remember the day like it was yesterday, though the years have tried to soften it. I got a call from my youngest son. I hadn't spoken to him in months, not because we weren't trying, but because life and pride and old habits had put distance between us. I almost didn't answer. I almost let the voicemail sit there, ignored, like I'd done so many times before. But something in me whispered, "This is it. Pick up." His voice came through the phone, a little shaky, a little hesitant. I could hear the pause in his words, the way he searched for the right ones. And then he said something that made me stop breathing for a moment. "Dad, I forgive you." I sat there, stunned. Not because I didn't deserve forgiveness, but because I didn't expect it. I had spent decades carrying the weight of my mistakes, thinking I would never be free. And here it was, handed to me by the very person I thought I had failed. We talked for hours that day, really talked, about the past, the hurt, the silence, the things left unsaid, about the pride that kept us apart and the love that never left. I realized then that forgiveness isn't just about the one asking, it's about the one giving. And sometimes it comes when you least expect it, and it has the power to open doors you thought were locked forever. That message changed everything. It reminded me that even after years of silence, even after mistakes and stubbornness, love and forgiveness are patient. They wait for the moment you're ready, not a moment sooner. And when that moment comes, you can choose to step into it or you can let it pass. I chose to step in. It wasn't perfect. There were still hard conversations, still apologies to be made. But for the first time in a long time, I felt hope. Real hope. And I learned another truth. You can't control how others respond to your words, but you can control whether you speak them. That choice, speaking, reaching out, forgiving, loving, is what makes all the difference. Rebuilding a family after years of silence and hurt is like fixing a house that's been abandoned. You can't just slap on a coat of paint and call it done. You have to inspect the foundation, repair the walls, patch the holes, and sometimes tear out what's beyond saving. That's what it felt like with my family. After decades of pride, stubbornness, and miscommunication, we had a lot to fix. Some cracks were small, easily patched with words and attention. Others ran deep, stretching back to childhood, to losses, to misunderstandings that had never been addressed. I started small. A phone call here, a visit there, a simple apology whispered across the table. I listened more than I spoke. I asked questions. I waited for answers. And slowly, very slowly, the walls began to come down. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks. Arguments flared. Old habits of silence returned when emotions ran high. But each time, I reminded myself, progress doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to keep moving forward. I watched my children open up. Not fully, not all at once, but enough to let me see their hearts again. I watched my siblings laugh at old memories, even as we admitted the hurt we'd carried. I watched my own heart soften in ways I hadn't thought possible after all those years of carrying it alone. Rebuilding doesn't erase the past. It doesn't undo the mistakes, but it creates space for new stories. Stories of forgiveness, of patience, of love that has been tested and survived. I realized that the work of rebuilding is ongoing. It never really ends. You just keep showing up. You keep listening. You keep speaking. You keep forgiving. And in doing so, you create a family that's stronger not because it's perfect, but because it's real. There's beauty in that. Real beauty. The kind that comes from knowing how fragile it all can be and still choosing to try anyway. At 75, I carry a lot of lessons. Some I learned the hard way. Some I learned too late. And some I only understand now, in the quiet of my own reflection. The first lesson is this: love is louder than pride. Pride will make you wait. Pride will make you silent. Pride will make you believe you're protecting yourself. But love, real love, keeps trying, keeps reaching, keeps waiting patiently until you finally open your heart. The second lesson: silence is powerful, but dangerous. It can protect you, yes. It can give you space. But it can also isolate you, separate you from the people who matter most, and create wounds that take years to heal. Third, apologies are never too late. It doesn't matter how long it's been since the fight, the insult, or the hurt. Speaking honestly, admitting your wrongs, asking for forgiveness, that's how you begin to mend what's been broken. Fourth, time doesn't heal on its own. Time shows you what you've lost. Time gives you perspective. But healing only happens when you meet it halfway, when you speak, when you reach out, when you show up. Fifth, family is built in moments, not perfection. Sunday dinners, shared stories, quiet gestures, phone calls, even arguments, they all matter. They all create the rhythm that holds a family together. Don't wait for perfection. Show up anyway. Sixth, forgiveness is a gift you give yourself too. Holding on to hurt doesn't punish anyone else, it punishes you. Letting go, forgiving, even when it's hard, frees you in ways you can't measure. And lastly, love waits always. For your children, your siblings, your spouse, even yourself. It waits for the day you're ready to step past fear, past pride, past silence. And when you finally do, it teaches you that it was never gone. It was only waiting for you to see it. These lessons are heavy sometimes. They come with grief, with regret, with longing. But they're also filled with hope. They're filled with possibility. They're proof that even when family bonds break, they can still be repaired if you're willing to try. I carry these lessons in my chest every day. And as I sit back, thinking about the decades behind me and the moments ahead, I feel a quiet gratitude for the chance to say what I needed to say, to reach for what I thought was lost, and to know that love, true, patient, enduring love, never leaves. There's a feeling that comes with finally coming home, not just to a house, but to a family, to yourself, to the heart of who you are. It's quiet. It's steady. It's the kind of peace that doesn't need applause. After decades of pride, silence, and mistakes, I finally felt it. Coming home wasn't about returning to the past. It wasn't about erasing the years of distance or pretending the hurts never happened. It was about showing up, even when it was hard. About being present, even when I wasn't sure anyone wanted me there. I remember the first time I walked into my brother's house after years of near silence. The air smelled like coffee and old wood. My nieces ran to the door, squealing. My brother stood there, hands in his pockets, waiting. And in that moment, words weren't necessary. Presence spoke louder than anything. We laughed, we talked, we cooked together. We didn't rush to fix everything. We didn't try to rewrite history. We just shared the present, and it was enough. Coming home is about small gestures. A phone call, a shared meal, a story told at the table, a hug that lingers just long enough to say, I'm here. I'm still here. I realized then that family is not a static thing. It's a living, breathing collection of moments. Sometimes messy, sometimes fractured, sometimes full of love you almost forgot existed. And yet, it's always waiting for you to return, waiting for you to participate, waiting for you to show that you care. I think about my mama often. I imagine her smiling quietly from wherever she is, nodding, proud that we finally remembered her lessons. Patience, persistence, presence. Coming home isn't just about reconciliation with others, it's about reconciling with yourself. Accepting that you made mistakes, that you carried silence too long, that you let pride get in the way. Accepting that you are still capable of love, forgiveness, and connection. And in that acceptance, you find freedom. I am 75 now. My body aches in places it didn't before. My hair has thinned, and my hands bear the marks of work and time. But my heart feels lighter than it has in decades. Because I came home, not to a perfect family, not to perfect relationships, but to something far better, to honesty, to love, to connection, to the understanding that even when family bonds break, they can be repaired if you're willing to step forward, speak, and listen. And for me, that is everything. Sitting here now, looking back over 75 years, I see it all laid out like the pages of a long, winding book. Some chapters are filled with joy, some with heartbreak, some with lessons learned the hard way, and some with moments I'm still trying to understand. I've learned that life doesn't hand out clear instructions. Nobody tells you how to navigate family, pride, or silence. You figure it out as you go or you suffer in the trying. I've had my share of both. Looking back, I see the mistakes clearly now. The times I held back words, the times I let stubbornness rule over love, the times I thought I was protecting my family but was really protecting my ego. Those are the chapters one wish I could rewrite. But they're written, and I carry them as reminders. I also see the victories, small but meaningful. A phone call that restored a connection. A hug that said more than words ever could. A story shared at the table that bridged decades of silence. Those moments, the victories, are the ones that matter. They are proof that repair is possible, that love waits, and that courage is worth practicing, even late in life. I think about the family I've rebuilt. It's not perfect. It never will be. But it's real. It's alive. It's full of laughter, stories, and yes, disagreements too. But disagreements now are met with dialogue instead of silence. Pride still visits occasionally, but it no longer drives the house. Love is in the driver's seat, patient, steady, forgiving. At 75, I've realized something essential. Life is too short to hold grudges. Too short to let pride dominate. Too short to leave the important things unsaid. And too short to waste the opportunity to connect with the people who matter most. I don't pretend to have all the answers. I still stumble. I still hesitate. But I know this. Showing up, speaking honestly, forgiving freely, and loving patiently, that is the way to keep family alive. That is the way to keep yourself alive in the hearts of those you love. And as I sit here, reflecting, I feel a quiet gratitude for the lessons learned, for the love that waited, for the chance to make things right, even if imperfectly, and for the understanding that no matter how broken things seemed, repair is always possible if you have the courage to try. I am 75, yes, but I am also hopeful, present, and still learning how to love better every day. And that, I think, is a life worth living. Now, at 75, I think a lot about legacy, not the money, the titles, or the things you leave behind, but the love you leave. That's the real inheritance. That's the story that carries on long after you're gone. I've made plenty of mistakes along the way, but I've learned that a legacy isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, speaking your truth, and loving the people in your life the best way you know how. It's about giving them a model not flawless, but real of how to forgive, how to reconnect, how to persist even when it's hard. I see it in my children now. The lessons I wish I'd learned sooner are the ones they seem to carry naturally. Patience, compassion, the courage to speak even when it's uncomfortable. I see it in my grandchildren too, the tiny sparks of love, curiosity, and resilience. They don't know all the pain I carried. They only know that love exists in this family, in the stories, in the hugs, in the shared moments that matter. I've come to understand that the legacy I leave is built not in grand gestures, but in everyday choices. In picking up the phone instead of waiting. In saying, "I'm sorry," instead of staying silent. In forgiving instead of keeping score. In showing up, even when it's difficult, even when it's messy. And I hope, when my time comes, that the people I love will remember that. That they'll remember the man who, despite pride, despite silence, despite all the mistakes, kept trying, kept speaking, kept loving. That's the legacy I want. A legacy of love that waited. A legacy of family that survived its trials. A legacy that reminds the next generation bonds may break, but they can always be repaired. Walls may be built, but they can always be torn down. Silence may linger, but love always waits. If there's one thing I want them to carry forward, it's this: life is too short for regrets. Speak your heart, forgive freely, love boldly, show up, keep trying, and remember that even after decades of mistakes, repair is possible, and love is stronger than pride, stronger than time, stronger than silence. That is what I leave behind. That is what I hope they carry forward. That is my story. If this story resonated with you, you're not alone. Whether it made you feel anger, sadness, relief, or even a spark of hope, we want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and share your story. Your words could make all the difference for someone going through the same struggle right now. If you think more people need to hear the truth before they fall into manipulation, hit that like button to spread the word. It helps the algorithm share this video with those who really need it. It's that simple: one click, one voice. And if you want more stories that dig deep into family betrayal, financial revenge, and the power of walking away with your head held high, make sure to subscribe and turn on that bell. You won't want to miss the next one. Thank you for sticking around until the end. You're not just a viewer, you're part of a community that values boundaries, self-respect, and knowing when to walk away. But only when the other person actually deserves a second chance. Catch you in the next story. Take care of yourself and keep holding those boundaries.